Like to thank our sponsors as always: Epson Photo Shelter, Pro Photo Daily, American Photography, and Archive Magazine. Um, so tonight we're going to be talking. We're going to see these really beautiful essays on caregivers and dealing with disabilities and how that relates to the family dynamic. And James had reached out to me about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago about him and Macy and Anna, and he was telling me about everyone's body of work, and I said, yeah, we have to do this. We just have to have an evening where these photo essays are shown. So tonight we're going to have James Lattanzio, Anna Grevenitis, crucified that, and Mary Cassandra Lee, Macy Cassandra Lee, who's going to start us off. So Macy, you share your screen, and off we go.
Awesome. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, your screen is good. Just speak close into your mic.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Frank and James, for this opportunity. I'm really, really excited to share with you all my body of work and what I've been doing. And I feel like as a very new photographer, I am coming from like a very interesting angle, coming from more nonprofit work and actual caretaking. So before anything, just wanted to introduce myself real quick. So I go by Macy. I am a Filipino documentary photographer. Right now, I am a fellow at ICP in their documentary and visual practice program. I'm starting later this week, and I'm really excited. And I'm also going to be working with their public programming, so event at ICP, which is going to be really great for the rest of the year. I've done a lot of the photo essays that I'm going to share with you all. I've done that a lot in the Philippines, so I work with people with autism. My brother has autism, and I also have been documenting my grandma with Parkinson's disease and dementia. So a lot of my work is really revolving around nonprofits. Before I was a photographer, and now I'm moving and transitioning more towards like really long form projects. And what I really hope to like cultivate out of this sharing and this evening is to really create a conversation about why people with mental disabilities should be talked about more, at least in photography and photo essays. So I first did my work again in the Philippines. I'm originally from there. I migrated here in the US in 2019, back when I started my education in California. And my history with photography really started with street photography. I photographed a lot of street children and people in my community in Manila, where I'm from. And the camera that I used was like this really janky old Nikon D90 that my mom had for probably like 8 years. And it was only very recent that I got like a new camera, which is a mirrorless camera. So I think that the interest was always there, but it was only like a year and a half ago where I really started to pick it up. And this is where my work again really started in the Philippines. So we work with a lot of special education communities, specifically special ed schools, and that's where I really learned to see where my documentary photography can grow because I already had that community. And so building it up, I realized more and more things about the art of photo making and also putting a story together, which I will share more later on. These are some young people that I work with, and I also still work with them here in New York. And when I moved to the US in 2019, I continued more street photography, but I also learned more about the art through curating. So before I even did like the body of work, I worked with a bunch of photographers and visual journalists to create a show about mental health and culture, and also psychology. So these are some of the images that I curated. A lot of them have to do with mental illness and vulnerability, and a lot about diasporic experience. Like as a person of color, it's very different for people to like express their stories. There's a lot more holding back. So I really wanted to create that space for them to feel comfortable. And this was probably one of the greatest teachers that I've had in photography. Like these people were really able to help and guide me find my own voice in it. And then Worlds Through Minds is something that I'm also doing in New York, and I hope to continue to do aside from ICP. And it's basically a free event space to help visual creators get free guidance. That's also where I worked a lot with Anna specifically, and we were able to do a lot of outreach through that. So this is a lot of text that I will go through and not really like spend a lot of time on, but this is just some things that I've learned again as someone who did more outreach before photography. And this is something I feel like every like documentary photographer should understand. And I was sharing a little bit about this with the coordinator at ICP in the education department because we were talking a lot about why it's important to get context and history with people before actually putting yourself out into a community. So I learned that getting to know a space and getting to know a group of people really, really takes time. You need a lot of empathy, compassion, and you also need to ask yourself a lot of questions regarding how you want them to portray it and how you want to be able to accurately capture what people are going through, even if you're so close to them. And this is something that I have been really asking myself, and again, something I also want to learn from Anna and James specifically, especially when capturing people that are so close to you. I photographed my brother, I photographed my grandmother. How can I best communicate with them and also portray them in a very respectful way? And I think that in my experience photographing people with disabilities, like I really learned that before you introduce your camera to them, it's really important to have that conversation and also make them feel at home and understood. And also coordinating with families is very important. Talking to people in their immediate communities is a great way for you to get to know them. And something that I always live by in my photography is the most personal is the most creative. Martin Hershey said this quote, and I really, really live by it just because your personal stories are the most provoking. And this is my simple process of photographer. I really try to get to know the communities first. I think this is like the baseline for starting my process. And when photographing children specifically, I really try to warm them up with the presence of my camera before shooting anything. And again, this is something that I take days and weeks and months to do. And this is something that I did independently when I was in the Philippines over the summer. And something that I always do is read books of all kinds throughout this process, which I will also talk about later on. I have a lot of books regarding caretaking and disability that I recommend. And another piece of advice that I really follow again is a bunch of questions that I ask myself before photographing when looking at an environment. And I think that these sets of questions by Melanie are one of my favorite things to live by and kind of analyze and go through once I'm in that specific environment. Capturing what you see, what nobody knows, and what you are yet to see when you revisit that space. So this is the beginning of my presentation, I guess, visually. Over the summer as well, I did a story about ADHD, and this is more of a photo illustration. I recently worked with the Asian American Journalists Association, and this is a story about a certain Chinese family that dealt with ADHD. And for this project, I really had to be kind of creative in kind of showing what ADHD is and how it is possibly visually portrayed through drawings. So I made use out of the interviewee's childhood images. I basically compiled probably 50 images from her childhood, kind of chose a few and tried to portray how she felt. And ADHD for her was a big stigma again in Asian culture. Mental illness and mental disabilities is something that a lot of families are still trying to understand. And the way that she described her ADHD was really something that kind of made her feel different from other people. She was fidgety all the time as a kid. Her parents had to really put her into therapy. I think beginning at age 7, age 8 during her formative years, so that she was able to cope up normally in school. And so I was able to kind of portray this visually through kind of drawing this line over her head and making her kind of have this differentiation than her sister in terms of experience. And this is another photo illustration that I did for this story. I was able to kind of put into different segments how her sensory systems work. People with ADHD and also many other mental disabilities are very sensitive to sound and visually as well. Whenever she found herself in a very crowded environment, she would tell me that she got overstimulated, she got overwhelmed. It's something that she didn't really want to be around. And so, this is something that I try portraying visually again through her childhood photos. And this, again, this is a very unique project because I wasn't photographing the person in this particular story, but I was making use out of her own personal photos. So I think that in any kind of situation, you can also get creative. Um, in the next slide, these are photos that I photographed firsthand over the summer. Again, I do a lot of my work in the Philippines, and what I'm going to share with you all today is all of the work that I've done in those communities. So these are partner communities that I worked with in Manila and in the outskirts of the Philippines. So I went to three provinces: Bulacan, Batangas, and Pangasinan, which are three remote areas in the Philippines. I work with three schools there that work with disabled children, specifically children with autism, cerebral palsy, and ADHD. So these are two kids that I photographed. Well, one of them is a kid, and then the other is a senior citizen that's been living in this special ed school for over 20 years since being abandoned. And something that is very special about this project, and something that I really wanted to photograph with as much empathy and as much kindness, much as possible, is that a lot of these children are abandoned. So there's a lot of intersectionality, at least in my country, where people with disabilities are left in schools, and so the teachers would have to take into care and take into consideration what would happen to the child. For example, the girl over here, Anna, she was abandoned by her family when she was 12 years old. And she came from a very third culture family where her dad was Caucasian and her mom was Filipino. And so they both fled the country and left her at the school that she was currently residing in. And I took time to interview the teacher, who was also my brother's teacher growing up. And she told me that she didn't want to send her to like special services and the government because they would just abandon her again. And that cycle of finding a home for her would be relentless. And so I took probably 3 weeks to visit her every day or almost every day when I was back home, and only photographed her the last 3 days that I spent with her in this farm. Just because she was very uncomfortable with the camera, I think. Or I remember when I started bringing it around, she would kind of ask what it was, um, and she only makes use of really a few words in her and she talks in Tagalog as well, so I had to speak in my language too. I had to be very very careful with her in that process, and so again, that's something that I experience a lot when photographing these communities. And I must say that it's okay as well to take your time, even if you have that decisive moment, spending time with these people and caretaking for them. Like, even if you have a decisive moment as a visual creator, like, this is something that I should be photographing. If you don't really feel like it's the right time or the right context for you and your subject, you really don't need to force yourself to. There were many instances where I found myself in that position, and I just had to be really patient with that process. And then the person on the right, Lee, is a more elderly person. I believe he's turning 50 this year, and he's one of the oldest people in this school slash shelter in the farm. And his family actually migrated to the US. He's actually a US citizen, he's a dual citizen. And what's interesting is that one day his family just completely left him with his one cousin in the Philippines, and they all migrated to Texas. And what's crazy is that a lot all since all of them are U.S. citizens, like they knew that he would be able to get the health care and the privilege of a new life that he deserved when if he moved here, but they didn't bring him. And so that's something that again the teacher of the school expressed to me was really frustrating because he had to go through three different homes and transfer into the school finally when he started turning 45 or 46. So he's been in this home for 4 or 5 years. And again, it's something that I really had a lot of emotional time really trying to digest and trying to get context of and understanding where he's coming from. Because that's really what I wanted to um, do with this photo story in particular is to really capture that life that he has experienced, but also trying to capture the new life that he's trying to cultivate. Like these two have been in the shelter for the longest time and also like live in the school. Like the school is on the second floor, they live on the first floor. And again, something that I really wanted to do in this particular story is to try and show people that these kids have a chance in gaining a new life if you have the proper people, the proper tools, and the best kind of community support. Like community can do so much, and I believe that they really had a great head start in their new life moving forward because of people that were able to donate, because of nonprofit spaces. And so it's so special, and I'm just so happy that they are in better hands. These are more photos from another school in another remote part of the country, and these are just more what the kids look like when they're in classrooms. I tried my best to sit down and observe how teachers interact with kids, how children are able to communicate with their peers, and kind of seeing the lines with their struggle. And kind of my question to myself when photographing is always how can I effectively capture kind of the struggles of educator and student, especially in special education, is very interesting. How can I capture that accurately in a visual way, and how can I make people understand and gain more empathy from these pictures? This is another student from the school. Her name is Amanda, and she's 6 years old. She's more high functioning autism, and I believe she also was diagnosed with ADHD later on. So she's very high functioning, and this is one of the classes that the program has in the school where they have dance classes in the morning and more academic classes in the afternoon so that they balance out their schedule. And again, this is something really interesting for me when I captured this photos because all of a sudden in the middle of the class they were doing a very interactive Zumba session, and she just stopped dancing and she was just standing and looking at her teacher. And then after I took this photograph, she started looking at me and just was staring at me for probably 10 minutes. And so that's where I got the cue of kind of like putting or hiding the camera so that she wasn't distracted. And so I feel like another thing that I've learned throughout this process of this photo story is really trying to be conscious of the activity or what the people are doing, especially people with disabilities, specifically autism in particular. They can get really distracted with outside people who aren't a part of their daily routine. And I was really fairly new to her. This was probably the fourth day that I was in the school, but I was really new to her. And so I knew I had to kind of step back a little bit and kind of be more of an observer instead of a photographer. So I feel like that's another thing that I learned in this experience. And again, I'm still learning. I'm a very new person in this field, and so this is just a lot of my experience.
Yeah,
So,
Macy, just a question for you.
yeah.
Is there any significance that these places are outside of the cities, that they're in the middle of, nowhere? And what a good question from Jamie. What is your determining factor to do color or black and white?
So for the first,
Frank, before Macy answers, Macy, hold on one second. Frank, before Macy answers, can I have a little bit of an insight about the cities that she mentioned because I actually grew up in Macy's town. So, Macy, so, like you mentioned before, some of the people were from Batangas and
Yeah.
some of the people were from Bulacan. Was there any issues for them to get the proper treatment considering they were so far from Metro Manila per se?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. As you know, like if you're familiar with the area, especially if you grew up in there, there isn't a lot, and I feel like even in the past few years, nothing has improved. At least in those two areas, in terms of educational access and healthcare access, there isn't a lot of good insurance in the Philippines. And
100%.
kind of connecting that to Frank's question regarding if it makes a difference that they're outside of Manila, which is like the main city, it does make a difference because I had to also kind of wait a bit longer for me to get accustomed to the area is also really hard to reach. Like I had to drive like several hours. Um, some of these children were never photographed in their life, so seeing that was very intimidating. I somehow felt like in the beginning of my process, I felt kind of like an actual like alien because they would really look at me, especially when I had it. So I had to really, again, like what I said in the bullet points, really get to know the community first, especially if they're not familiar at all with photography or photojournalism. Um, and yeah, someone just messaged me on Zoom about my wording on Caucasian and white. Yeah, so she had white parents for one of the kids that I covered. But yeah, so to answer that question,
And your determining factor on color or black and white.
um, for me, it was more of a personal preference. I don't really. I think I just was looking at the image and kind of how it looked like on color while editing, and sometimes I just personally prefer black and white for some of them. So that's kind of like how I make those decisions as of right now. Um, but I know like if you make and pitch like a story, like an actual photo story, it's important to have them in color. So I guess for some images, I like it in black and white. But yeah, I hope those answer those questions. And this is the last story that I will sift through real quick. This is the other project that I worked on over the summer, and this is really probably the most intimate family member that I've photographed over a course of time. And this is my grandma who is has Parkinson's disease and dementia. She started having dementia 3 years ago and was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease a year and a half ago. And what's interesting and what I appreciate and love about this story is that I was really able to talk a lot with her caretaker over here named Jackie. Jackie has been working for my family for 7 years. And the story is so close to my heart because she's dedicated her whole life and soul um, to other family members and then focus on my grandma. And what's interesting is that over the summer, when I did start photographing them every single day for around 2 months, both of her parents died, and she didn't have the opportunity to go back home just because she was full time taking care of my grandma who was bedridden and needed assistance every single day. So that's something that I also really want to share. I feel like the beauty of photographing intimately with family members is that you get to learn so many more things about the people around you and your history simply by starting a project or starting to reach out to even extended family members. So that's why I really loved it. There were some days where my brother visited as well, and seeing him interact with my grandma was very special because my brother, I felt, was very, very concentrated and very, very full on, wanted to help out in any way he could. And he's on the spectrum. He was diagnosed when he was 3, so he doesn't really. I've seen him in certain like very sensitive situations, and sometimes he dissociates, but I feel like the few times that he visited my grandma, he was really trying to pay attention to what she needed and also was listening to stories um, on my grandma's caretaker, Jackie. So Again, this is Jackie. She's a caretaker of my grandma that's been with us for 7, 8 years. And getting to know about her and her life story was also very enlightening to me. And the one thing I will highlight about this story is that she told me that caretaking in itself is the most fruitful and the most rewarding job um, that she's ever had, because she's able to see people through the process of grief. And so I asked her why realizing and kind of like seeing grief through other people was important. And the reason why it was so important to her in her process of caretaking is that she was able to really realize the universal human experience, which is that everyone goes through a similar passage, and that eventually everything is all seizing. And through that, she was able to value her life much better. She was able to value her husband and her children's life much better. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from her. And being able to interact with her every day was really such an honor. And able to photograph her um, was great. And she's always smiling. She's never really disheartened or kind of put down by anything. And so I think through this image, you're able to see, or I was able to feel, how caretaking really builds you up as a person and is able to really make such a strong foundation for you. These are more photos of my grandma. This is really the most mobile she can get aside from being in her bed. Once or twice a week, Jackie would put her in her wheelchair and she'd kind of um, go put her around the house. And something that she requests too, um, from all of us in the family, is just to redo the orchids. That's like the one thing she will say out loud, is to kind of change the orchids in the house at least like every 2 weeks. So that's something that she looks at probably for a few minutes and then she requests to go back to her room. And this is the last image that I'm going to share from the story. The hardest part, I feel like, in Jackie's job is really lifting her, because my grandma also gets fidgety and complains a lot when being carried. And so this is something that she told me firsthand that she's trying to perfect, is how to lift her properly without her feeling uncomfortable in any way. And even in the smallest detail, again, you can see how much Jackie has cared for her and how much she's trying to get to know her. So I feel like, again, in all of these processes that I was able to share, again, I'm still a student. I'm still learning a lot about documentary photography, long form storytelling, but it's really just the values that I feel like stuck out to me when taking care of people who are disabled and when taking care of people who are neurodivergent. Um, it's really trying to be a very flexible and effective medium for those people and trying to shed light about what they're trying to get out of in their life, and also the people around them and how they have impacted communities and what they have taught, simply by being themselves. So there's a lot of simplicity in this kind of storytelling that I've ventured into in the past few months, and I think it's so beautiful. And I think that, again, as you like learn more from the other speakers, you'll able to get to witness like people's humanity, which is, again, a big part of what photographers are also meant for. So yeah, that is the story. Thank you so much for listening. um, yeah, I'll pass it on to Frank.
Macy, that's really great. And I mean, I say this, I don't know how to say it right, but your idealistic spirit rings through, and your teaching and nurturing of us is really a gift in your speaking. And I'm sure when your fellow students hear you speak about your project, they can feel your passion and your advocacy, which is really commendable, really a terrific, and letting us share your personal journey like that is really terrific. And we'll have more questions after. But next up is James.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thank you, Frank, for hosting this special night. Yeah, I just have so many people to thank when you do a project like what I've done at ICP, and all the support I've gotten here. I went back to school in 2019, and it changed me in a big way. Um, I went back to ICP and studied in the documentary program um, during that crazy pandemic year. But that led me to receive a fellowship from the Reader and Alex Hillman Foundation to continue with my work on caregiving and disability and autism. Um, but like I said, when doing a project like this, there's so many people to thank. Um, all the instructors, the chair people at ICP, Karen Marshall, Darren Mickey, um, and Fred Richin especially, for all the support. And during my fellowship year, I was mentored by Kira Pollack from Vanity Fair, um, who was so tremendous in guiding me in doing this work. So let me share my screen and I'll just get right into it. Um, so I'm going to, oops.
Yeah, James, how long did your project take to from start to finish?
I worked on this for 1 year. Um, I don't know what's going on here. Hold on. Sorry. Um, I had started in 2019 working on a project with my son who was disabled. Let me just read this statement and so I'm actually, this has been ongoing now for 4 years in different stages. So in 1997, when my son David was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, little did I know my life would be changed forever, or that it would inspire me to create I Am Your Voice, You In My Heart, a documentary project that tells the untold stories of parents who have selflessly dedicated themselves to caring for children with ASD, from first learning of their child's diagnosis to caring and advocating for a person with a lifelong disability. This project reveals how ASD has affected the lives of each of these parents through their voices and stories. We learn what it means to hope that a child can achieve their unknown potential, from the smallest victories like tying their shoes to being able to live an independent and dignified life that no one could have predicted. Stories of heartbreak, joy, anger, denial, hope, frustration, and worry entwine with the obvious love that these parents feel for the person they've been entrusted to care for. At the time my son was diagnosed, autism awareness was almost non-existent, with the rate of autism being about 1 in 1,000. Today, according to the CDC, ASD affects about 1 in 36 children, 2020 data, in the United States, with the cost of caring for Americans with autism reaching $268 billion in 2015, and is expected to reach $461 billion by 2025. ASD is a developmental disability characterized by deficits of social interaction, nonverbal communication, and speech, along with repetitive behaviors, all of which vary in severity, with boys being 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than girls. There was no known single cause of ASD. My intention in making I Am Your Voice, You Are My Heart is to bring awareness to the personal struggles of caregivers and the heavy toll it takes on their lives and on society. I bring their sagas to light in order to further the discussion of the issues that they are faced with and to advocate for solutions to these problems. Always crucial, these issues became especially relevant during the worldwide pandemic. As schools and centers for the disabled were closed, the onus fell completely upon caregivers to put aside their own needs to care full-time for their children, both minors and adults with ASD. By visualizing the daily struggles and routines of families affected by ASD, I seek to break down misleading stereotypes of persons with autism and developmental disabilities, which have real-world consequences. I hope to offer light to the humanity that each of us holds, regardless of what our abilities might be. So I will, it's hard to see I'll read these. Nobody's going to care for them like we do. Nobody's going to love them like we love them. Kim Gordon speaking about the anxiety parents feel about making the decision to place their adult children into housing for the disabled. Morristown, New Jersey, November 11th, 2021. Small steps. Small steps are big in our world, right? How many people would be blown away by their 11-year-old son being able to tie their shoes? Sometimes I think it's like a little, that's an experience a lot of people don't have. I mean, a lot of kids won't be able to tie their shoes. They won't be able to do it. But for people whose kids have tied their shoes, they don't get the same level of satisfaction as I do. So sometimes I think, you know what? I get to experience that thrill. You know that maybe another kid is selected for a travel team or something. That's how I feel about him tying his shoes. Stacy Cermak, Montclair, New Jersey, March 6, 2020.
Well, James, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Like you start a project like this, like when is the moment of freedom for you, for Macy, for Anna, that says I'm all in on covering this topic to the point where there are no more boundaries? Because it took you a long time to get to this point of shooting this story. And where was it in your head 5 years ago, 10 years ago? But what happened now for you that gets you to say, I need to do this?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's been in my head for a long time, and I always photographed my son. It wasn't until really I gained the skills and um, the sensitivity and a contemporary and learned a contemporary approach at ICP to do a project like this. How do you so after being at ICP for a year and getting the feedback from them, and it's like how do you go into somebody's home? How do you talk to them? How do you have empathy for them? How do you this is you just don't go into somebody's home and just start photographing. This is their life. How do you get them to open up to you? And I think the key there is learning how to open up yourself and exposing yourself and being vulnerable yourself to other people and listening to them. And this is all something I've learned over the last few years. So I have to thanks. I reached out to my son's center, his day center, and asked the director there, would anybody be willing to talk to me? And it was overwhelming, the response I received. And parents, caregivers, they want to talk about their experience. They feel isolated. They don't feel understood. There's so many different things to this that it's that you learn over time how to go about doing it. And yeah, I mean, I am a parent of a disabled son, so it's just like, how do you, but when I started doing this project, my son's 29 now, um, and you kind of tuck a lot of things away um, about your experiences and your trauma of raising a child who's disabled and everything you've been through, your journey. And then when I started redoing this project, it brought everything to the surface again.
And James,
yeah.
Were those folks, do you feel, waiting for you to come along?
I think so. I think so.
Because I know in our conversations we were talking about how it's this subject no one wants to talk about, right?
It is. It is a subject.
And then you came along, and it was just this outpouring. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Like you just lifted up the cover, and now did that help you as far as your fears, or fear may be the wrong word, but this emancipation for you personally to share, to want to be all in?
Yeah, I mean, just when somebody reveals themselves, I mean, you become all in. When somebody is telling you when you're interviewing somebody and they're crying, telling their story, you have to be in. I mean, if you're not in, you can't be there. Getting some feedback. So yeah, I mean, you're either in this or you're not. So, and I think if you're put in this position or not put in this position, that's I mean, if you're going to do a project like this, if you're not all in, people are not going to reveal themselves or be authentic or expose their vulnerabilities to you. So it goes hand in hand, really. A person is not, it's just not going to work if you're not all in. You have to be all in, and be able to listen to somebody tell you, everything they've gone through. Yeah, so
Okay.
it kind of like it all comes together, and I think if you're not all in, you can't do it. It would be just, first of all, nobody's going to even talk to you, because when you're talking to somebody, and if you're somewhere else or you're not all in, people can sense that, and they don't want to be exploited either. So, and, why are you doing this? And you better have a good answer. And so if you're not all in, you probably don't. So yeah. So I'll just, let me go on. I'll go on. So you'll be lucky one day. Portrait of Kristen Olsen in her home, parent and caregiver Cameron, age 25, who's autistic. During our conversation, she told me, I'll never forget a doctor saying, well, you'll be lucky someday if you can change the napkins at a McDonald's. That was a blow when somebody puts a ceiling on your child that's not even 2 years old. This is very sad news that Cameron recently died in a tragic accident. She wasn't responding. We went to this park that's right along the Potomac. Airplanes are flying over from Reagan Airport. My sisters, who were both in education, noticed that she wasn't even looking up, and it was very loud. She was just kind of wandering, running around the grassy area with nothing specific to play with. Then they noticed that she wasn't responding to her name. Kim Gordon speaking about first noticing her daughter's, Olivia's, autism. I had asked her when she had first noticed that maybe something was not right. This is Jennifer. Portrait Jennifer Rose, age 25, in her bedroom. Her mother, Gail, who is an advocate for persons with autism, passed away in January 2022. She lives with her father, Jonathan, in Morristown, New Jersey, but wishes one day she could live on her own. She told me, I want to show the world what I learned as a person with autism and my life through it. I want to show the world, here's what I can do despite my difficulties. Here's my experience. Here I am, and there's no stigma attached whatsoever. I've gone through a lot. I want to tell the world. This is her father, Jonathan. Jonathan Rose held a photo of his two daughters, Jennifer and Flora, when they were children. Both were diagnosed with autism. She had a formal neurological exam, and that was confirmed. We were, I recall, getting in the car, just breaking down and crying, because I thought we would never have a normal life, and she would never have a normal life. Jonathan Rose. The happiest, fullest life. Often people think people with autism don't have the empathy or emotional capacity. He's so aware of my feelings, like he knows if I'm upset about something, he'll come over and sit with me. We have a very strong bond, and I think that since the time he was a little boy, he has this incredible memory. He remembers songs that we sang. Sorry, it's a little emotional. He remembers books that we've read. So he's a beautiful boy, he really is. He has his challenges, but he's a very pure soul. And I just want him to get to his best place possible and have the happiest, fullest life. Christine Haskins, Connor's mother and caregiver.
So James, I mean, you're sitting with these folks. How does this affect you and your boy?
Well, I mean, it was, be honest, Frank, it was very difficult. It really hits home, and there's a string that runs through all these stories and my story, and hopefully by sharing these stories, it creates community and support for each other. I would say. So in that way, it's helpful, and if parents can share their stories and help each other, um, that's all good.
So
Uh,
do you feel that each of you take comfort with each other?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And we're we're all part of this community of parents, and you know almost everyone I interviewed was a parent of an adult child, um, who did they become guardians to. So at that point, they become caregivers and also parents. Um, so very very unique situation for all of us, in this role that we've none of us asked for, and but it's life, and yeah. So Jonathan was talking about his girls being bat mitzvahed, um, and how it was spectacular, um, that they had achieved this. If Connor's happy, I'm happy. Connor Haskins with the parents, Craig and Christine at home. The things that the things that make me happy is when I reflect on his life. When he told me this, I nearly cried. The thing that makes me happy is when I reflect on his life and about what his life could have and should have been. When I turn and ask him, "Are you happy or are you sad?" And he always tells me, always, 100% of the time, always tells me he's happy. That always puts my mind at ease. So if Connor's happy, I'm happy. They're in there. Will Olivia be able to function fully as an adult? Nobody knows that. I can't. I can't say she will or she won't. I can tell you she needs constant supervision. She's doing tremendous. She's very intelligent. And it's got to be incredibly frustrating for all these other individuals that just can't get it out. They're in there. Kim Gordon, Olivia Gordon's mom. I still look at Olivia as my little girl. So thinking about it, oh well, yeah, she's an adult. It was hard because it feels like it has some finality to this effort to have her recover. So that really gets you. Talking about transitioning into adulthood. Nothing good about that. Kristen Olson, parent and caregiver for Cameron. She spoke to me about raising a son with autism and another son with mental health issues. I'd say that it's been challenging. It's been challenging to see when it's not working, in understanding what life is about, both good and bad. When you see both your children suffering, there's nothing good about that. How you thought life was going to bring. When you read the legal document alone, it definitely kicks you in the gut. You're signing a document guardianship for someone who's incapable of making decisions for themselves. Just that incapacitated statement slaps you across the face, and but I knew in the end that it was in Connor's overall well-being, that it was for Connor's overall well-being, sorry. And it's sad. It's not what you thought life was going to bring you. Christine Haskins. In my own little world. I remember being a kid, not really playing with other children, just sitting there by myself, maybe shuffling wood chips or doing something else, but not really interacting with children. I knew that ever since I was a child, I always wanted to be part of a larger community, but I never really knew how to be part of a larger community. I was just in my own little world. Killing me. I kind of pushed it way down. You're not going to get upset. You're going to help her. But I know somewhere it was killing me. Kim Gordon. How should we do this? you think of what you could have done different or better, more or less of, I think of that often. What could I have done a little bit different? If I had done X, would he be in a better place? But those are unhealthy thoughts right now. I'm just trying to work through each day and wanting to get back on track. Every day questioning, how should we do this? My husband tried to diagnose every hour. What's going to happen next? Christine Nelson. Again, very sad news that her son has passed away. Jonathan Rose holds a photo of his wife Gail and his daughters Jennifer, now 25. Gail passed away in January 2020, and he's left to care for both his adult daughters with autism. He told me when Gail was dying, she left a terrible sense of failure. She felt this terrible sense of failure with Flora, that she invested all this effort and somehow nothing has come of it. Maybe we'll sense when we come to face death, we all feel a sense of failure because we never accomplish everything we'd hoped to in life.
James, question for you. Did you think of shooting video of
Yes,
this?
yeah. These are the stills that most of the work is video. And I have a video at the end. It's really incomplete, and I'm going to be working on it more this coming fall. Where to take it. I had a lot of different ideas, and when I got into doing the project, a lot of people had said to me that it should be a documentary film, and I believe it should be. And I've been seeking support for a documentary film. Right now, it's mainly video interviews. That's where all these quotes have come from. So I'll show you a short clip of the video at the end. That is part of the work. Artwork is with text on Jennifer Rose's bedroom wall expressing her hopes and feelings about her relationship with her father and her mother, Gail's grave illness. Her best life. I want to be her resource, her advocate, everything I can so that she can live her best life. Kim Gordon. We kind of sometimes get lost. Craig and I have had to struggle financially. We had to struggle with our marriage. We had to struggle through jobs. We had to try to give Carolyn, Connor's estranged sister, the most normal life possible. And you kind of sometimes get lost in yourself. I mean, I could say that I'm starting to kind of break through now. You kind of see the progress you've made. So it's a journey for sure, and it's not over.
And can you speak to why the sister is?
I don't want to talk about that. They were uncomfortable with that.
Yep.
I actually shouldn't have mentioned it. But it has to do with the disability.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I apologize for asking.
Yeah. So this is a video. I'll set it up. It's the interview of me talking to Kim Gordon about you know, your hopes and dreams for your kids and where they can go and what people have told you and what they can't do and I had a lot of that with my son. You know, he'll never be able to do this, he'll never be able to do that. And nobody knows. But there's a lot of insensitive doctors, teachers aides, who will say things and just not have much sensitivity towards a parent. And so she's talking to me. This is when I realized that even though I tried to distance myself from this project a little bit, that I couldn't distance myself from the project. So you'll hear my voice. I'm not mic'd. I put in subtitles so you can hear what I'm saying. And it became, and when I also realized in the very beginning that I wasn't interviewing people, I was having conversations with them and about our experiences and how we can relate to each other. But also, it's her daughter Kim singing Over the Rainbow. Olivia, sorry. And the profound thing about it is that Olivia is nonverbal, but she's learned how to sing. So now that she's older and the years have passed, and you took guardianship, and do you feel like she's where you thought she would be, or no?
No. I'm so pleased and so proud of where she's at, based on everything that she has gone through. And she has come, and I keep looking at her picture, but she's come a long, long, long way. But not where I thought. I thought we would be done with this by high school. I thought she would be going to Morristown High School and she'd be a cheerleader. I thought she'd be recovered. So no. And like I said before, I'm not giving up. I see so much potential for her.
So nice. Want to do it again?
But my
No.
expectation early on was,
Okay, ready?
we're gonna get this done. She's gonna be one of these recovered kids, and I'm gonna speak at all these conferences about what parents can do. And she's not there, and I can't believe I'm not like getting emotional about this, because when I think about it on my own, I do.
Once in a lullaby.
It's funny you mentioned that, you speak at conferences, and how you helped your daughter recover, because you hear a lot of those stories.
You do?
And it's kind of like heartbreaking when it doesn't happen to your kid. I'm about to cry.
Exactly. See, if you cry, then I'll cry, because that's how I am.
I can't believe this.
Yeah. I went to, I took a week off from work. This was the summer before she started at the school I talked about, when she had that amazing third grade teacher. And I actually had a case manager who said to me, that is a language and learning class. Olivia will never learn to write. Olivia will never learn to read. Olivia will not be able, and I said, please, don't say anything else.
How about Somewhere Out There? That is one of my favorites.
Great. Amazing work. I always think of that word hope, and it's such a fucked up word. Because we all have it, and sometimes it comes, and sometimes it doesn't. But hope is such an intense word. Because I can imagine all the folks, they live for hope, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's
You have to have hope, right?
You have to, against all the odds, or having cancer, whatever it may be. James, incredible. And I have to say, knowing you, I don't know, it must be 5 or 7 years by now, from this guy that was you personally, really an incredibly shy guy, to be doing these interviews. I mean, that is just a phenomenal evolution as a person, as a photographer, as a dad. I mean, bravo, really tremendous.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks so much.
Tremendous.
Thank you, everybody.
You'll see in the chat room, and we'll come back to this. But now we have Anna. Anna, you're up.
I don't know. I don't know how I can go after this. This was so. It's gonna be hard. Anyway, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, James and Macy, and thank you, Frank, for hosting. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Do you see?
Yes.
Okay. So the way I'd like to present tonight is by focusing on some points while I show the images via a slideshow. First, I'm planning on introducing you to my series Regard. Then I will speak specifically about motherhood and disability, about the gaze, about ethics and collaboration, and finally about my process. So this is my artist statement. When my daughter was born, I was told that she had the physical markers for Down syndrome. A few days later, the diagnosis of trisomy 21 was confirmed with a simple blood test. So that's something very different than parents that have children diagnosed with autism, because that happens way later. For us, I always feel very lucky with that we were told right away what we're up to. And today, years later, she's 19. Lulu is a lively teenager, yet these markers have grown with her, and her disability remains visible to the outside world. As we go about our ordinary lives in our community, getting ice cream after school, going grocery shopping, walking to the local library, I often catch people staring, gawking, or side glancing at us. Even though their gaze feels invasive, I perceive it as more questioning than judging, at least most of the time. So with this ongoing series, Regard, I'm opening a window into our reality. My series is very basic in its concept. It shows a child, it shows a mother, it shows them living at home, performing familial acts. Because I believe in the connective power offered by the depiction of domesticity, I hope that Regard helps the audience rethink some of their assumptions about people living with disabilities. And with this, I hope my series finds a humble spot within a movement that helps people with disabilities gain visibility. So I realized just now that the slideshow is not going. Maybe I'll do it manually. Oh, here we go. I'll just do it manually. So I'd like to talk a little bit about motherhood and disability. In any transition into motherhood, women may relay a sense of loss, a sense of shedding an old skin and getting used to wearing a new one. This is not new. But when you are catapulted into the world of disabilities through the birth of your firstborn, something deeper happens. You also lose your sense of place. You are disoriented, you do not know anything, and it is hard to find similar experiences around you. You start living a parallel life. You have a young child just like your friends or family members who have young children. But yours is not sitting yet. Yours is not teething yet. Yours is not speaking yet. You start building a shell and learn to listen more and share less. It happens naturally, and it is nobody's fault. It's just a fact of life. Right now, my daughter is 19, and it's still happening. My friends tell me about their children going away to college, while I'm still laying down with mine every night for her to go to sleep. It is an experience in motherhood that can feel more isolated and isolating. So one may say that with Regard, I reclaim all these silences, and I'm saying it the way it is for me. About the gaze. What I was trying to do, as you may notice by now, in each photograph that I'm taking of my daughter, I stare back at the camera. So what I was trying to do with the gaze was I was trying to add some theatrical dynamics into the photographs. Documentary photography is very effective when the viewers feel they are in the room. They are fly on the wall. Through the photographer's lens, they get to see something they would otherwise not know about. Indeed, the very skilled documentary photographer, as we saw some examples tonight with Macy and James, is often letting them in on a secret scene. For me, I did not want to just offer the viewers an easy way out into our lives. What my daughter and I experience when we're outside in our community is intrusive on the part of the outsider's gaze. They gaze at us, they gaze at my daughter, and we cannot do anything about it. We are passive. So what I try to do by using a staring back gaze in regard is ask of the viewers some accountability. With the gaze, I am telling them, I see you gawking. I do not let them off the hook. They are active in the act of peeping. I feel closer to the truth of what is really happening when I stare back at them. If I just set the scenes up and photograph them without looking back, the viewers would not have the uncomfortable experience of recognizing their role in the act. By me staring back, I gain acknowledgement for me and my daughter.
So,
About
Anna,
ethics and...
no, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
I thought you were finished. Continue.
Oh, no. About ethics and collaboration. I am not a person who is living with Down syndrome. How can I portray my daughter's joy, pain, her day-to-day life realistically? Should I portray it realistically? What is my role as a photographer? What about the power struggle between photographer and subject, especially when the state subject has developmental disabilities? Am I exploiting her? Putting myself in the scene next to my daughter helps me bridge this ethical issue. I'm not just showing her, I am also showing myself. Photographing the double self-portraits became a humbling experience as an image maker, as I had to let go, control, and experience the vulnerability that subjects offer when they accept to sit for a portrait. Our collaboration has evolved over the years. Nowadays, Lulu is also participating in the creating of the image. We talk about the photo beforehand. She gives me insight and feedback about how she feels about the photo, and we modify as we work. We are on equal terms. It has become a performance for both of us, and maybe through this layer of fiction, a liberation. So I just wanted to talk, that's my last part where I talk about technicality a little bit. So the way I started to create the photos is basically I try to think of how to create that distance between me and the viewer. And so it's actually interesting to go last in this presentation because I feel that the two other participants, photographers, were explaining how they're actually really trying to be with their subjects and create, opening the vulnerability and all of that. Whereas for me, it's kind of like the opposite. I want to create a distance between me and the viewers because I'm trying to protect my daughter basically in the photos. So I figured that using black and white would be a good way already because I'm removing the emotionality of color. So that's one step I took. The other step was definitely my gaze, as I talked about just briefly before. And another step was we're actually performing in all the photographs. So even though they appear to be, spur of the moment in the house, or we're putting makeup on like I'm showing right now, or oh, look at us, we're dancing. They are all set up and created, staged, performed for all the photos. So this one, I'm going to stop for a second, is actually a very important photo because this is the first time that Lulu basically started to full on collaborate with me on the shot itself. So it was the way it happened is it was a day where I had to iron a shirt, and as I was doing it, I had the idea of the photo. And since Lulu did not have school that day, I asked her, you know, the usual, do you want to do a photo? And she was like, oh yeah, because she likes the performance idea. So she's always ready, you know, to do performance. So the idea I thought of for this photo specifically was to have her as the princess on the bed eating macaroons while I was ironing in the back. And so I took a few of these, but there was an issue with the scale. It just didn't look that well. And I was getting frustrated. And Lulu has this habit of, we take one photo, she goes around, she looks in the view, and she looks at the photo and she says whether she likes it or no. And so I was getting frustrated, and she told me, well, why about we switch? And I was like, are you sure you're okay with ironing? And she's like, yeah, we switch. And so we did that. And here was the photo. It was much better and it worked. And since that time, which was, I believe that was 2019, we are now always kind of like discussing the shot between us and before we do it. So
And so
a
these
few
are
more
all on a
things.
timer?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so these are all
Yes. So exactly. So basically, the way I create the shot is I have it in my head, and then I start prepping. You know, I mean, in this case at the beach, I couldn't ask people to do what I wanted, but I try to prep the background. I get everything ready because Lulu also, even though she likes to collaborate, she also has about 10 shots in her as far as attention span. After that, she's kind of, I lose her. She doesn't want to do it anymore. So I get everything set up. And then I invite her in the frame, and I usually let her do whatever she wants. I don't tell her, I don't direct her. I'm more focused on what I'm doing myself. Similarly with the outfits, she always comes as is because she's a fashionista, so she's always going to look amazing anyway. And I try to, on my end, I try to tone it down a little bit because the focus is still, I'm trying to have the focus on her more than on me. So I'm usually I'm not trying to, you know, I'm just trying to be mom, if you want, on the shots, in the shots.
But the shot of you two walking on the street,
Yes.
how did you do
Good.
that?
So as she's older now, I'm trying to take a few more pictures outside on the street as well. This one I was helped by my son.
Okay.
It was still on the tripod. Still set everything up. He was just physically behind the camera, making sure no one was just gonna like walk away or trip it over or whatnot. But I'm still, I do a lot of running around and sweating during those. They're not glamorous.
And I mean,
It's on a timer of 10 seconds.
And can you speak to the therapeutic side of this? Like, what is this
Yes.
doing for you? And Jamie mentioned, you know, these are sort of like self-portraits, you know, as well. I mean, can you speak
Yes.
to that?
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, some of the things that and we've heard through Macy's documentary and through what James shared as well. Some of the things that caregivers go through is that isolation that I was talking about, and frankly, sometimes anger. And I felt very often that if I expressed myself through my photography, it was kind of like the creating the thinking of the shot, the creating the shot. As I just explained right now, it's pretty physical. I have to jump around. There's a lot of activity around the shot itself. After that, you're just like, it's washed away. It's really it's a way for me to process a lot of the feelings that I have around all the the daily issues that we go through. This photo specifically was done during COVID. So here, so it was 2020. So Lulu was, I guess she was, I'm very bad at math, 17. And she's always had, really a lot of trouble falling asleep. As I mentioned before, I still lay down with her every night to make sure she goes to sleep. But with COVID and everybody being at home, her not being able to go to school, all the schedule, everything was disturbed. Obviously, everybody knows what happened. And also the stress she was feeling from all of that, her anxiety, especially the night frights, became just crazy. And so she would stand over my bed like 5 times a night. So at some point we decided to just bring a small bed into our bedroom so that she would, hopefully we would all sleep better. And it actually worked really well. And so this was the first night that we did that. We installed the bed, and then this is actually a good photo to answer your question, because it was so important to me to actually remember that moment through one of these photos for my series, because just as if you would write a poem, or maybe I don't know, go run in the park, just expressing myself through the physicality of the photo, through our performance of it. I was not just keeping it inside, I was putting it out there. And whether people were going to see it one day or not, it actually doesn't really matter to me. In an odd way, like it's not, I'm really doing it for myself, and I'm very lucky that people are interested in seeing the photos, but it's really therapeutic first. And so thank you for your question. That was a great question.
So, in that vein of how you're doing this, would you be doing this? I mean, was this part of your nature before we realized that Lulu had the disability to be so engaging, or did this come as a byproduct?
So this is not my vein at all. I studied literature, English literature. Before I had Lulu, I was teaching composition around New York City as an adjunct. And then we had Lulu. Actually, we had moved away from New York City when we had Lulu. And when I had Lulu, I just stayed home and I started to be with Lulu all the time, which was so fun. Lulu was the funnest baby to have around. Never cried. I actually kind of was, a little bit like the first year of her life, she never cried once. I have to tell you that. Like, this is real. She never cried. And so I was kind of like looking down at other parents being like, what is so difficult? And but I was also living upstate on top of a mountain. It was a very idyllic scenario. And then life brought us back to Brooklyn, but I still remained a stay-at-home mom for a while. And I think out of being at home with the kids, I had to basically do something, right? And I always loved photography. I was, kind of like an amateur photographer before I had kids. And I took a few photo classes, and thinking that it was gonna kind of like help me. But very early on, I realized that I was still stuck with the kids. So when we had assignments for the photo class, I couldn't just like run off and, go 10 days somewhere and shoot. I was still home with my kids at the park, at the playground, and do all that. And so I started to use my family for my assignments, specifically the kids. And right away, I had very interesting feedback from both the students and the teacher, something about my eyes. I was really connecting with them. I was revealing things. And so little by little, I started to just get more confidence in taking photos of my personal sphere and not feel so bad that I could only do that. And then for the period of, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 years, I focused solely on Lulu, and I did documentary style photography on her. I would take a photo a day. And as I was doing that, I was getting, these amazing shots, very, very vulnerable moments. And I think that's when when I was doing that, and when she was also getting older, I started to feel more and more uncomfortable with how much I was putting her on display. And that's when I started thinking, how can I create something where we are more equal, and it's not just me showing who she is and leaving her vulnerable to all sorts of, you know, misrepresentation or judgment or things that were not really true. And so that's how I started to decide to be in the shot as well, and do all these different things with the black and white, with the gaze, with the performance.
Okay.
So yeah.
No, perfect answer. So your presentation is done now, Anna?
Yes, so I just wanted to show, I'm going to try it because I think it would be really nice. I'm going to show and explain something about one photo. So this photo here, I would love to share with you, after I explain something about this photo, a short video, because what happened is, we were at my friend's house in Michigan, and she has this magnificent grand piano. Neither me or Lulu play, but Lulu's brother plays the piano. And so once in a while she sits at the piano, and she loves playing and singing and all of that. So that's what she was doing. So I sat next to her, and she was playing, the piano. And I had the idea of the shot right there. So I leave the piano, I start setting up, and in the meantime, she started recording herself playing and singing. And so I'm going to play for you the video of that, because in the video you actually see the flash going. And so you see how many, like a few times I'm doing when I was trying to get that take. So let me stop sharing this, and I'm going to try to share the video. Let's see. Oh, wait, because Jay told me to do it with advanced. Yes. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. Do you see the video?
Yes, we see the side of her.
Okay. Do you see the video?
Yes, we see the side of her.
Okay, so let me, okay. Very
Anna,
good.
you
So
have to
now
press
just,
play.
okay.
There you go.
I just want to die, and I so young. Carry on, matters. Too late, the time has come. It's on my spine, and it will be alright. Goodbye, everybody. It's I died to the early the way. Mama, ooh, I don't want to die, and something was so young. Carry on, nothing really matters.
How great. How
That was
great.
Lulu.
How nice. How very, very nice. Oh, great. So, I guess this is a question, and we could open up, everyone raise their hands, or if you have a question, put it in the chat room. Great presentation. But for all of you, how is it, how do you get to the point where you could share so much of your private lives How is that? How do you get comfortable around that idea? Um,
Well, I think
James.
it's you have to know that you're helping and you're educating and um, other people and making people aware of the humanity of those who are disabled and disregarded. I mean, I think it's the most disregarded group of people. Not only that is the in the autism community, as the title of my project says, is um, they're people who cannot speak for themselves, literally.
Right.
You know, and so it's my job to speak for my son and to speak for other parents, to bring awareness to, as you can see, the humanity. You know, it's so easy to write people off. And when when you're a parent or caregiver of somebody who's disabled, and they're this is a person. you
Mm.
know
And
they're living a life, and maybe it's different, but all our lives are different.
Mm.
And so I mean, I think this is where the philosophy of neurodivergency is, like, we all think different, we all are different. What makes you any different than anybody else, or what makes my son different than anybody else? He lives his life the way he's living it, and um, who are you to judge, or who is anybody to judge his
so
life,
so
and
but
or think of him as being less?
so from that standpoint, like from exactly that point, Macy, Anna, how do you go to advocacy? Right? Because those are sort of like first cousins, right? You're in it, and now you go to this advocacy space to get the word out, to say that we're normal, to say that we're all different. You know, can you speak to that, Macy, at all?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I appreciate photography is that it's such a universal
Get closer
language.
to the closer to your computer.
I hope I'm like louder now. But I was saying, like, something I appreciate about photography is that it's really a universal language. Like, my experience is really outreach first before documenting, and so I found that it was really hard to communicate to people what, for example, Parkinson's disease. Like, explaining the context of Parkinson's can take a lot sometimes, and the connection and the empathy that I have with someone who has no context whatsoever on what Parkinson's is, for example, or what autism implies, I found that visual storytelling is such a great tool because you immediately get to literally see someone going through it, and it creates and it opens kind of a new door in your brain, to the way you understand people, like kind of like what James and Anna was talking about, is that a part of humanity, like when you outreach to other people, you really have to open that door, and sometimes it's really hard, for you as, like a person to just do that with, certain like layman's things. But like with photography, I found it was like so effective, and it also strikes a conversation literally. I When I first showed this to some of my close friends before sharing it in any space, especially the series on my grandma, for example. I mean, they really tried to make a conversation and tried asking, what she's going through, how I was able to photograph that during that amount of time, and if I'm also going to photograph in the future. So I feel like, yeah, I feel like it goes hand in hand always. Like, you always have to use your words to some extent in your writing, but when you add in like visual storytelling, I feel like it really changes things.
Yeah. So Anna, from that, so you have your advocacy, the door has been opened, and there's no way of going back now, right? I mean, there's no way of not wanting your voice to be heard through your images for all the right reasons, as especially as it educates us, and we get a peek inside that, inside, you know, your world, the three of you. So I guess the question is, where do the three of you go from here as it relates to advocacy and as it relates to being journalists yourself, photojournalists? Can you take on other subjects, or does this become your life's work to be an advocate in this space? Because there's a woman, Stephanie Sinclair, that maybe people know, who did a whole series of young brides, and that has become her, you know, sort of her issue in the most beautiful way. So where do you think it goes for you, Anna?
That's really an important, interesting question, because I never, I didn't go into this as a
Right.
photojournalist or documentarist or whatnot. As I explained, for me, it's very therapeutic. And actually, the new series that I'm working on right now, I don't think I could have done it if I did not do Regard first. And the new series I'm doing right now is the same idea. It's also performance. I'm also in the photos, but I really got strength from working with Lulu together. And now I'm taking whatever I learned from that to and transform it into this other subject that's even more personal and sensitive, and I'm using those techniques to express this new project, which I'm not going to go more into, but I'm just explaining to you that I guess it's almost like a natural continuation. With the project Regard, for me, it's still ongoing, because I feel that Lulu right now is 19, and it's such a crucial time where we're trying to figure out what's going to happen, in the next, let's say, 10 years or whatnot. So I feel there's still a lot of material there, especially because with people with disabilities, the older they are, the less we actually see them out there. So my platform is open for her and our message forever, basically. I'm saying that. But there's also what I learned from doing this project with her, I'm applying to other projects that are maybe not disability related, but still advocacy and still emotionally heavy, I guess.
And you're connected to it from your heart.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think I could work without having that connection. Definitely.
Yeah. Jay, you had a question?
Yeah.
You had your hand up.
Macy, how do you feel about at least the resources back home? Because I'm sure it's as tough enough as it is to do what you do. I'm sure it's even more heartbreaking to see people that don't have the means. For people that don't understand, there's really healthcare is very, very tough back home in a third world country like the Philippines. I've actually myself personally witnessed people turned away from a hospital from life saving. I mean, I'm talking emergency room stuff. Like in the Philippines, if you go into an emergency room, it's not like any other hospital here in the United States. It's very similar to a hotel. There will be registers, and if you do not have the money, you could literally walk in with a gunshot wound, and they will call security and throw you out of the building. I'm sure that makes it even harder for you to see people with no means. How much harder was it, especially for people when you're in Batangas or in Pampanga or somewhere where it's far from where they need to be, and somebody that doesn't have the means to do it? How much harder was it to even, do your work and even be able to keep everything together?
So I guess a part of that question is, does your advocacy based on that set of circumstances get you to fundraise, to look for grants,
Yeah.
to keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything you said, Jay, was like true, and it still happens on the regular. Specifically, like, especially when the extrajudicial killings were happening, like a few years ago when we had our old president. That was a huge thing that photographers also covered, like the whole drug war in the Philippines. Um, it's it's a very interesting dynamic. So I feel like what I do is really preparing months ahead. Because I go home at least once a year, and I try to go home like every summer, or I try to give myself like a 3 week break since like starting working. Um, this year I planned that whole trip, or I reached out to that school in January, and I only photographed them in July. So I really would coordinate with them like at least once every 2 weeks, like remotely, and then eventually went in person in the end of June, and then just started bringing out my camera in July. So that whole like timeline, it just takes a lot of time, and I think sometimes that's really hard because the distance is also what makes it hard for me specifically. I think that if you have a heart and a head that is willing to open yourself up to situations like that, then it will just be a continuous bit by bit process. But I think what really made it difficult for me is really the distance. But it still worked out in itself. And the next time I will go home, I will be photographing them again. And in addition to that, like the fundraising aspect, we do a lot of fundraisers. So for example, for Worlds Through Minds, which is kind of like an event space that I have here in New York, I worked with Anna, for example, and I kind of have kind of a space where photographers are able to talk in person, and there's an open like donation um, opportunity where people can, for example, like Venmo the organization however much they want, if they attended the event. So that's something. Something I'm really trying to think about more as well. And I know granting is a huge thing here in the U.S., especially for a lot of photo organizations and nonprofits. So that's something I'm also trying to look into as well.
Yeah, if you have any websites that you want to put in the chat room so people can look into it, that would be great. So, James, as you're going through this, do you see, a little bit feeding off what Macy was saying, bureaucracy, like the frustrating piece of helping families who are in need, young people with disabilities in need. Do you come across that, in your conversations with these families? That is there a huge frustration level, or are the families so embedded with their child that they don't even have time for that?
No, I mean, there is a huge amount of frustration dealing with the red tape and bureaucracy on in trying to get your child or the care that they I wouldn't say deserve, but the care that they should get on a certain level. I mean, or as especially troublesome now is residences for the disabled. The waiting list in New Jersey for residents is 10 years.
Really?
Oh my God.
And parents don't live forever. And so at some point, this is the painful part of I think one of my slides touched on it. You know, putting your child in a residence, because you can't do it anymore, or if you become ill, or Jonathan's wife passed away last year, and he's in his 70s. So yeah, it's like, how do you advocate for more housing? How do you solve this problem? It's obviously money. and it's very, very expensive. So, yeah, I mean, how do you better support parents? I think can more people have empathy towards parents who are going through this? So many times I felt disregarded. You try to tell somebody, or talking to another parent, they're talking about their children, you're talking about your children, and trying to explain it, and they're just like, well, I have my problems too, and so yeah, um, or just they don't get it. I think that's the biggest thing is about um, parents of those who are disabled, is that a lot of people just don't get it, and um, I think doing a project like this and being able to show it, I think you get it then, but you have to be willing to. It's a tough topic. You have to be willing to go there and listen to these stories, and yeah, so yeah, it's hard. It's like, how do you advocate? How do you make the government pay more attention? How do you? I mean, this it affects. I mentioned in my statement the it affects everybody. It affects everybody's lives. It affects families, marriages, siblings,
So
careers, you name it, and thus it goes out from there.
If I could just say, can I say something?
Yeah.
I feel that one of the issue I've been grappling with is this whole idea of visibility and representation, right? So you want our children to be more out there in the world and seen more as we've heard, human beings that can achieve a lot, or maybe not that much, but still they're out there, they're having lives and things like that. So I'm thinking right now, like this summer, there was this show on Netflix, I don't know if anyone watched, Down with Love, which featured, it's kind of like a reality TV show, but with people with Down syndrome that discover, love or start dating or whatever. So obviously I watched. I watched with Lulu. She watched. Okay, we watched. And it's a great show, but it is sugar-coated so much. So it's not telling the truth. So you have here and there, you have these shows that, shows or I don't know, like projects or whatever that are, it's great to you're in between those two zones, right? You want people to acknowledge our children, our young adults more, but you also want reality, because if someone that has no idea about a person with Down syndrome watches Down for Love, they would assume that, they're okay.
Right.
Because what they show, the way it's edited, it's only people super high functioning that are able to have. I mean, this one guy is like a photographer at National Geographic. Like I don't even know how they did this, But I mean, again, very entertaining. It was great. Also, yes, go ahead.
No, I mean, I hear exactly what you're saying, and the thought just came to mind, like, because you have so many photographers who take up who cover a subject, and then it really becomes part of them, and they really become advocates. Maybe what has to happen is, if you three and then another three sort of come together as a group advocacy, an advocacy group for photographers, so you could share ideas. I'm in this space, you're in this space. Someone's dealing with cerebral palsy, someone's dealing with hearing defects, right? If all of you would come together and say, okay, what are you doing, how can we share resources in some way? And the resources could be having 3 or 4 interns who just, you guys sort of corral, this is what we need, find us this, write grants, something so that not everyone is doing something solo. You're all doing something together, and you could feed off. Oh, that's good. I could use that. Or that doesn't work for me, but it could be for somebody else. Because I think you all come from a beautiful, painful foundation of the need and the desire to give and to give back, right? So if you had something like that, if somebody organized that, around all these, because there's got to be 20, 30 photographers who've taken up issues and it becomes part of their lives. Like it, it will be for you guys. How can that be used to everyone's benefit? Just something to think about, for all of us. Anyone else has any questions or comments or anything? Because I have to tell you, everybody, the three of you, everyone is just raving, about these presentations, and better than that, you made us all think, and that's really a good thing. That's really,
Yeah.
really.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Samantha, go,
Yeah,
Sammy.
I'm a friend of Anna's, so thank you, Anna, for inviting me to this evening, because it's been amazing. The three of you, James and Macy, are wonderful, and I have never experienced anything like this, like looking at photography in this way. I have a daughter who is disabled. She's 21. She has Down syndrome. She was a classmate for a few years, right, with Anna's daughter Lulu.
Wow.
But my daughter has since graduated, but I'm a little emotional. It's wonderful. I've never, all three of you did an amazing job, and you all hit home in my heart and my emotion with connecting with everything you described. Each one of you, I have felt in some way or another. Even with Macy, with your grandmother. I mean, I have a mom at the moment who's in a nursing home, and seeing those pictures were beautiful. And it's even making me, I think, see my mom in a different way now when I do visit her. And James, you were wonderful. I have a younger cousin who's autistic. She's now 32. So many of the slides you've shown resonated with me, and I connected with. And I've never experienced, like I said, something like this through photography, and it's wonderful. And I will definitely look at photography different. And again, thank you, all of you, your hard work, and it's wonderful to see. And I really
Yeah, one of the things. Well, let me just say one thing, Sammy. That's really special about these three is their words. Images are great, but it's the marriage between both that makes these presentations really terrific, and the empathy that they come with their presentations. Because if you put that together the right way, it gets somebody like you to stop. These people get it, right?
Absolutely.
There's no sugarcoating. There's nothing to they get it. They're in the trenches, side by side with you. That's why these presentations were great for that reason.
Frank, you asked earlier about how do you put this work out there, right? And here's the reason why we put the work out there. Samantha, being touched by it, and other people being touched by it, and that's why we do it, and there has to be a calling, to do this type of work, and to know that you, by putting it out there, you can touch someone,
Caroline,
what's better than that? I mean,
yeah.
Really.
Carolina, Sandoval, do you want to share? You have a beautiful comment in the chat room. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, well, first, I'm a friend of Anna's as well, and so she invited me here. But yes, I have to say that all of the presenters, beginning with Macy, my mother passed away from dementia, and we, all three of us, my siblings and myself, were mostly her caretakers until she went into a home. But it's a very it just brought about so many emotions seeing that particular photo. Your other work is amazing as well. Which my brother-in-law is actually from the Philippines, so I hope that maybe I can share some of these or let him know about you, because that was beautiful work.
Yeah.
And then as far as James' photos, I mean, I just, it really makes you think about, my daughter's 16. And so it just really makes you think about where they're going to be, where she's going to be at when she's an adult. And my husband and I have just started talking about that, what that's going to look like. And I also used to say, oh, she's going to do it. She's going to be someone, and she's going to be independent. She's not just going to be living at home with us. And I've shifted my perspective so much to, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And so seeing those photographs really, it just really touched so many things, and just it really shows what us parents do go through. And then Anna, of course, like just it's I know exactly what she means. You're walking down the street and everybody's staring at you, at your child, and then at you, and that dynamic, and you almost feel like they're intruding in your world. So to show these photos where you're acknowledging this and opening it up to everybody, like this is what our lives are like, kind of like everybody else's, but also different. It's
and you should know that all these presentations will be up on YouTube. So for any of your family members that you think would enjoy, these sessions, they'll be up by the end of the week, or early Monday or Tuesday. They'll be on our YouTube channel, so everyone could see them. If you wanted to share there. For us, it's great, hearing from the people coming in to listen, that these three photographers moved everybody, and that's really great. Does anyone else have a comment or a question? Because this was just one of those another one of those terrific nights. So
I think Sandy had a question.
Yeah, and
Well, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that your presentations were, all three of you were absolutely amazing. But
Great.
I don't have any children like you. My children are regular children without any disabilities. But at a very young age, I lost my father when he was 46 and I was 13. My brother was 9. And my mother was young. She was a young woman. So after a couple of years, she started dating. And she met this man that she really liked. And he was the kindest man. But he said to her up front, this is never going to go anywhere. I have a son that I don't remember what his disability was. And he lived in a home that cost a fortune of money. And he said, all my money goes to my son. And one day he brought his son to my mother's house and he played the violin. And I remember sitting there and watching this, and I was just so amazed at the dedication that this man had to his child, that he's giving up any happiness he could have with my mom and us, totally 150% devoted to his son. Aside from that, I've had friends whose husbands developed Parkinson's, mothers who's developed Parkinson's, friends whose children had autism. So I've been touched on all your stories indirectly, I guess is the word. And you just did a wonderful job, absolutely wonderful job presenting this. God bless you.
Thank you.
Very nice. Bruce has a comment. Bruce, you got to unmute yourself, Bruce. Usually bottom left.
No.
There you go. No? Jay, can you unmute Bruce Byers? If it's not on a printed page, this guy can't do
He's
it.
unmuted.
Bruce, your mic's not working.
He can print books, but he cannot speak.
How about now? How about
Wait,
now?
I think it's coming.
Documented a lot of medical missions with cleft lip.
Make your volume louder, Bruce.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, still low though.
All right, so I've documented a lot of missions with cleft lip, and I put together a show one time, and these two people came to the show as we were setting it up, and I couldn't walk down the show because I was putting the stuff on the wall. They walked down the show and they came back, and the guy said he was very pissed at me because the images didn't allow him to get to the rest of the show because he was so upset looking at them. And I think that one of the problems with documenting is educating people to what the problem is, because a lot of the times I think they're afraid of what they're seeing. It's not, and because they don't understand it. It's not that they don't like your child or like you. It's that they're afraid to make any motion. They're afraid to engage because they just don't understand it. A lot of people have never seen a Down syndrome child before in their life. All of a sudden, one comes into their face. They have absolutely no idea what to do. So it comes off as if they don't like you or they're checking you out or whatever. So unfortunately, as photographers, documenting and educating is our biggest challenge, to get people to understand that this is a child with a difference, not a disability. It's a difference. They're all children. They're all people, but it's just they're different than another person. It's not I don't really see it as a disability. It's just that they're different. They live different.
Yeah.
They go different, and they should be treated that
No,
way.
you're right. You're right. It's an ongoing, compelling issue how society, I mean, is getting better and better with these issues to make people less uncomfortable. It's it's like Jamie said. Look how society's treating trans kids. That's the issues just are numerous. But I mean, I can't thank you. I can't thank all of you for coming. I mean, the three presenters.
I think there's a question.
Where? Who's got a question?
I have a
Or a
question.
comment.
I have a comment. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it is utterly important what the three of you brought up here. And I agree with Bruce that people are not educated with this. We have a cousin who is having a different way of teaching kids starting from school about the disabilities. She is running puppet shows, and her puppets are all having disabilities. So she has puppets with disabilities, and she shows them. She goes into schools. It's called NYC Kids Project. She goes to schools, and these puppets with disabilities tell about themselves to children. So this is another way of bringing up this issue with a very young age, when kids can learn about this without being weirded out or without
Stigmatized.
touching these issues in their adult lives. You guys have incredible courage. I just
Noon, if you would put that that name of the institution in the chat room, that would be great for anyone to pick up on that. That's a terrific piece of information. So this is yeah, a terrific night. I mean, any other comments? Any, not from you, Sandy. Any other comments? You know, yeah, I mean, these folks are, you guys did a great job. And, you know, usually, let's see, this is from Laura. Okay, all right, that's something else. Yeah, I mean, usually we let one of the photographers sign us off tonight. So if any of you, you know, want to give the last word, or all three of you give the last word, that's fine. Well, we'll start with Anna.
Well, last words would be thank you so much for, you know, as we explained, it's hard to get the word out there. So the fact that you actually offered your platform to us for this amazing evening, and thank you for everyone to, you know, seeing the faces of my friends. It was so nice, even though I was very nervous. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Frank, so much, you know, for offering this platform, because that's just the beginning of the work, is how to get the word out there, and that's the beginning. Yeah.
The other thing to know is that, you know, we're here. When you have new work, more work, and you want to show it, we're here. All you have to do, James will tell you, is just call me, email me, and you're on. You know, so that's a standing offer. You know, moving forward. You know, on. You know, that's in
Thank
stone.
you so much.
Okay, Macy.
I'd also just really want to say thank you. Like, this is one of the first few times where I really get to share it to a big group, like a bigger group, my work. And whenever, I mean, because I'm very new to all of this, like, it also feels really nice to be called a photographer. So thank you for recognizing me as a photographer, and for being really encouraging with all of your words for all of us to keep going. So yeah, thank you. And thank you, Frank, for this space. It's amazing.
No, great. Well, you're invited back. And James, sign us off, buddy.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Frank. I mean, that you did not even hesitate to, when I approached you about doing this, and you didn't even hesitate to say, yeah, let's do it. And it just says something about you, Frank, as a person, how amazing you are. Thank you so much. Thanks, Anna, for, you know, presenting along with me and Macy. Thank you, Macy, so much. And thanks everybody for their comments and for tuning in and being part of this. And yeah, thank you, everybody.
Great. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming in. We're up next week with Ted and Noon, and, you know, with their work from Armenia, and showcasing their new book. So if you're available next, well, you'll see the email blast. So I thank everyone for coming in. Have a great rest of your night. Good long Labor Day weekend. Be safe.